So when I shared that I was able to heal myself after having my esophagus and stomach biopsied for cancer just by switching to different foods, and if you haven't watched that video, we'll link to it below and you can go and check that out. But in sharing that, many of you asked what was the list of foods that I swapped out when I was first going down that healing journey. So I have got the top 13 that I have switched that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So one of the major things that I looked at was first eliminating any highly genetically modified crops. And so for me, that was swapping out the fats that I was cooking with. So I didn't use Crisco shortening or canola or vegetable oil like canola oil, which is a lot of it's from rapeseed oil or soy products. I made sure that I cut those out. So instead of using Crisco for shortening, I switched out instead to organic coconut oil. So this is unrefined cold pressed coconut oil, so it does have a very light coconut flavor to it. If you don't like the coconut flavor, which I don't really, maybe my palate's not that discerning to coconut, I don't really taste the coconut flavor in most of the baked goods when I'm using this. But if you want to use refined coconut oil, which is obviously refined, it's a little bit more processed, then it doesn't have the coconut flavor, and you could go that route. So this is what I use in place of Crisco shortening in any of my recipes. Now, some other options that I will use, and it'll kind of depend on what I'm making as well in place of Crisco shortening, especially in things like pie crust, is going to be, and I only buy organic real butter, so I will use real butter, or I'll use lard. And like I said, it kind of depends on what it is I'm cooking as to which fat I want. So for pie crusts, actually I like half lard and half butter make the best, most delicious, flaky, flavorful pie crust you've ever had in your life. And if you want to get my pie crust recipe, I'll have that in the video description link below. You can go and snag that recipe. But those are some of my favorites to use. And then when it comes to baked goods, so things like cakes, muffins, quick breads, most of the time I like melted butter, but occasionally I'll be doing a cake recipe where you don't want to use butter, and that would be where you would use the canola oil. And so instead I like to use the avocado oil. And so avocado oil has a high smoke point. So the smoke point is 500 degrees Fahrenheit, which means I don't think I've ever baked a cake at that high of a temperature. Usually cake recipes are like around 350, maybe 375 degrees. And so it doesn't have a smoke point. And for this brand, I get it at Costco, does not have any flavor to it. So I don't detect any type of a flavor, which is really key, especially when you're doing cakes. And then for roasting like vegetables and different things like that, sometimes I'll use this, but I actually like, for vegetables, I like the flavor of olive oil. And again, this I get at Costco. It's organic extra virgin olive oil, and so I'll use that. So those are primarily the fats and the oils that I keep on hand. And within those fats and oils, because I make so much from scratch now, those are easy swaps that had a big difference on, like I said, cutting out hydrogenated oils as well as genetically modified crops, and eliminating those in all of my baked goods by just stocking these types of fats and oils. Now, I talked about I make a lot of stuff from scratch now, and it used to be I used a lot of boxed mixes. So, 12, 15 years ago, I used a lot of boxed mixes, and even though I felt like I was making it at home, because I was, right? I was opening a box mix and maybe adding in an egg and some oil and water or whatever the ingredients were calls for. The base ingredients, as I said, as well as the ingredients in those box mixes, had a lot of those things that seemed to trigger me and had those genetically modified organisms or different fats that I wasn't comfortable using. So I switched out my flours and my sugars, and by just having those fats and flours and sugars and yeast and salt, just a few basic ingredients, I'm now able to make everything, and I don't buy boxed mixes for anything anymore. So one of the first easy switches that you can do is to buy organic, unbleached, all-purpose flour. Now, I don't buy everything organic, but my rule of thumb is I look at it, and I look at the Dirty Dozen. So every year you can look up the Dirty Dozen and it'll take the top 12 fruits and vegetables that have test for the highest pesticide load. And so for those ones, if we're not growing it ourselves at home and it's something I would buy from the store, then I make sure that I buy organic, or if it's products made from those, that I buy organic. Now wheat, which of course is what is made into our flour, that is also usually a high pesticide loaded crop. And I want to make sure that I'm lowering that load, and I don't want it to be bleached, right? I want it to be as close to unprocessed as possible. Yes, flour is still processed. So an easy switch is if you just buy organic, unbleached, all-purpose flour. I get mine from both Costco and Azure Standard. Then that is just an easy switch, and you don't have to do anything else other than switching the flour. There's no altering your recipes. It's just a one-for-one swap out. Along the same lines is I don't use regular white sugar anymore. So instead I buy organic sugar. So it's not quite as fine. It's a sugar. So I'll kind of just show you here. It's a little bit grittier is not really the right word because it totally dissolves into, and I use it one for one. But you can see it's not white, so it's not bleached. It is still pretty fine, but it's a little bit larger crystals than what you're used to if you're just buying like regular sugar from the store. And this has a little hint of molasses still in there. So yes, this is still a processed organic evaporated cane juice. It still is a processed form of sugar, but it's not as processed. And sugar can come from sugar beets or it can come from cane. And if it comes from sugar beets, there's a high chance that it's genetically modified. And so I want to make sure that my sugar does not come from genetically modified sugar beets, that it's not bleached. And I like that it still has a little bit of the molasses in there. It doesn't change the flavor, so it's not like you're cooking with brown sugar, but I feel like it gives a great depth and is a really easy swap to make out. So by making those swaps, then pretty much everything I'm making from scratch is from those base ingredients that I want. Now, those are just easy swaps to make that are just one for one. But I have to say, the further down this rabbit hole that I went and looking at nutrition and health, I do actually grind my own flour. So over here I have my spelt wheat berries and my hard white wheat berries, and this is where I keep the wheat berries that I use the predominantly and the most, and I will grind those into fresh flour to use obviously in my baked goods. So it's kind of, you get your absolute best nutrition from fresh ground flour. And if you're curious about what grinding your own flour looks like and entails, you can check out that video. I'll have a link here on one of the cards or down below and you can look at that. But of course, it's the investment of having a grain mill. It really doesn't take very much time though. Honestly, I can grind a couple cups of flour in like a minute. It's really fast, but it is another step, but one you definitely want to consider, which naturally leads to having all of those ingredients with the flour to bread. So a lot of the store-bought bread, now I have to say now, it's been 11 years since I started to make these transitions and was able to heal myself by the food. There are a lot more options available on the market now that do have good ingredients that you could buy already done from the store than there were then. Back then, to find a loaf of bread that didn't have hydrogenated oils and that was organic and had all the things that were my stipulations. I didn't want any caramel coloring, food dye, high fructose corn syrup, all of those things. It was really hard to find bread that met that criteria that I could actually afford. So making my own bread has been a huge part of that. And this is a loaf of sourdough. So this is 100% sourdough. I've got my sourdough starter here, and I really got into cultured foods and fermented foods, which a fully cultured sourdough loaf is considered a cultured food. The flour has been fermented before baking, but there's lots of different recipes. You can watch my video on how to make a sourdough starter and start doing sourdough, which is great. But there's also some really great recipes. The first one I used was my 5-ingredient, 5-minute of hands-on time, no-knead bread. And that is a super easy bread recipe to use. I've got a video here on YouTube. You can grab that recipe and see how fast it goes. And that's what I started with because it was just with those basic, very basic ingredients of flour, water, sugar, salt. No, excuse me, not even sugar. Flour, water, salt, and yeast. And then I add apple cider vinegar to mine because it improves the flavor as well as the longevity of the bread and the texture. So that can be another way to go is with your bread. That was a big one for us. Then I had to look at what we were drinking and especially what I was drinking. So as I shared in that previous video, I was a huge Diet Coke girl. I drank a lot of Diet Coke and hardly any water, which is a whole nother problem all on its own. So when I cut out all soda pop. One, most of your soda, there is some you can get now that is just made with sugar, but almost all of it has food dye in it, which was another thing I wanted to make sure I was staying away from. The carbonation actually did also bother my stomach, but then as well as the high fructose corn syrup. Or if you're drinking diet, it didn't have high fructose corn syrup in it, but it did have aspartame, which also is a huge trigger and can be really damaging to your health. So cold turkey, I cut out the soda pop and I drank just water. But after a while, I did get tired of drinking just water. And I did kind of miss having some of that flavor, a little bit of the sweetness and a little bit of the bubbliness as well. So a great thing as I went on my gut healing journey was kombucha. So this is my jar of kombucha, which I just have fresh brewed here. I'm actually getting ready to go ahead and strain this. I'll start a new batch and then strain it and put it into bottles to have in the fridge. But this has been great because it does have the SCOBY in there, which is the symbiotic colony of good bacteria and yeast. So it has a lot of great things for your gut flora and fauna and health. And you can flavor it however you want with just using different fruits. I like to do blueberry, raspberry, cherry lime is really good. So I can flavor this, or I can have it just is right now with just the black tea. But this has been a great way, and my daughter even really loves this. So this has been a great alternative for us to have something kind of special if you just get bored of water, that can still be really great for your health. Now, speaking of drinks, one of my other favorite things that really bothered my stomach that I've shared with you guys before is coffee. So when I first started doing this healing, I did quit coffee completely for about 6 months straight. And I think it was just Folgers, honestly, is what we used to drink. And it would really bother my stomach. But after 6 months of not drinking any coffee and swapping out all of these things and really focusing on trying to heal myself and paying attention to how I responded to different foods, I decided to try coffee again because I really missed it. And I found that by drinking an organic, and yes, coffee can be a highly pesticide crop, and not just organic, but also shade grown. So shade grown coffee has less acid in it naturally than coffee that's not shade grown. And this is also a fair trade brand. So I have tried just organic coffee that was not shade grown, and that does still bother my stomach. This is one of the very few coffees that I've had I can drink day in and day out and do it as, actually, we have an espresso machine now. And I can brew it hotly instead of doing toddy, which is with cold water and you let it sit. And this is the Camino Island Coffee Roasters, which I have a link to this that does give you a discount if you want to try their coffee beneath the video, and you can check that out. But that was one of the major changes that I made that has made a big difference, as well as what I put into my coffee. So, gosh, you guys, I'm doing a lot of confessing. I used to drink Diet Coke. I'm like, don't take away my homesteader card, okay? But I used to drink Diet Coke, and I used to drink like the Coffee Mate creamers, and I know if some of you love them, like, you know, and I did really like them. One of my favorites was the peppermint mocha, which they used to only come out at Christmas time. I have no idea because I haven't bought it in so many years now if that's still a thing or if they only have it certain times of the year, but I had to find something else to put in my coffee. So right now what my favorite thing is, and I kind of go back and forth, but instead of using that is I really like, and I also found this has been great for my gut healing. Yes, you're seeing some of my vitamins in here. But that is collagen protein. And right now I love chocolate. So instead of putting cocoa powder in there and a separate collagen powder, which I've used some other brands in the past and they've been fine, but they weren't flavored, this is the Bulletproof Chocolate Collagen Protein. And so it tastes really great. I'm getting my collagen as well as getting that chocolate flavor. This one does not have sugar in it. It uses stevia leaf extract, and I think it has erythritol in it, a small amount of erythritol. Now, some people have very strong opinions on whether or not to use a sugar alcohol. I'm fine with using a sugar alcohol. If you're not, then don't use it. Now, a few of the other switches that I made, again, this is like really for the base ingredients because I can use it in so many things. So I don't buy any type of condensed soup anymore and haven't for years. Now, if you're looking for replacements for like your condensed cream of chicken, cream of mushroom, cream of celery, you know, any of the cream soups, I have a video, you guys, you can make homemade condensed cream of anything soup, and I have all the different variations on my website, and I have a video on how to do it if you want the written recipe. I'm not kidding you. It is less than 4 minutes. I have had readers time it because they were in a hurry to get out the door for work, and they made it, threw it in the crock pot and left, and it literally is less than 4 minutes to make. It's super fast, and it holds up to, I've used it in the Instapot, I've used it in the slow cooker, I've used it in the oven, of course, just on the stove top. Like, truly, it is life-changing. So make sure you grab that recipe. But along those lines, because I don't buy the condensed cream of anything soup, I don't buy condensed tomato soup anymore either. And so I do grow my own tomatoes and preserve all of my own tomato sauce and salsa products. I grow a San Marzano Lungo, which is a paste tomato, is the variety that I grow. And I make, usually I just do up tomato sauce because that's pretty fast and easy. And then I'll take this tomato sauce and I'll make my pasta sauce, I'll make my pizza sauce, marinara, like whatever I need it for, as well as I will can it in pints. And that is what I use for my condensed tomato soup. So I'll use that like when you're making shepherd's pie or hamburger casserole, or you just want tomato soup. I'll mix that tomato soup with the next item that I also make from home and from scratch. And that is bone broth. Bone broth is so easy to make at home. You get the benefits of the collagen and the gelatin. It's really easy. And so I will mix a jar of broth with a jar of the tomato sauce. Simmer that on the stove, add a little bit of salt, some garlic and onion powder, and you will not know the difference. It tastes just like, it's wonderful tomato soup, and it's super fast. To make your own homemade bone broth, I also have a video on that, so you can see the method that I use to do that. Very easy, as well as if you want to can it, so you've got it shelf stable. If you don't have a pressure canner and you don't want to can it, you can throw it in the fridge for up to 5 days, and then you can also freeze it. But with the base of these, I can make any type of condensed cream soup that I want, or if I want it to be cream, I can actually use milk. But if you're dairy-free, then you can also just use the bone broth. And so this allows me to do the base of so much of the things that I'm cooking. And again, no food dye, no high fructose corn syrup, none of the hydrogenated oils. It's in glass. And I don't know if it's just the absence of all of those, but tomato sauce does not bother me at all. So I can make any of the tomato products and consume them, even chilies, and it doesn't bother or trigger my acid at all. Okay, so up next, we gotta talk mayonnaise. And you're gonna see a jar of Best Foods mayonnaise here because I'm keeping it real with you. I do not use the Best Foods mayonnaise. If I do, it is very, very sparingly and not very often. But if you are the person in your family who is making the swaps and the changes and really has the drive for healthier ingredients, you need to be prepared and to know that not all members of your family will necessarily be on board with you or with all ingredients. So with all the rest of the ingredients, my family's been pretty good. But you wanna know what? My husband is not giving up his Best Foods mayonnaise. And I am okay with that. So we do have Best Foods mayonnaise in our refrigerator, and that is what my husband goes for. The reason I don't like Best Foods mayonnaise is because of the soybean oil. Soybean is highly genetically modified, and there's varying studies that suggest that soybean can mess with estrogen levels. So for those reasons, I try not to use Best Foods. Sorry, Best Foods. Okay, so I use avocado oil-based mayonnaise. So yes, we have 2 jars of mayonnaise in our fridge. This is the Chosen Foods brand. I really like this brand, and this I get at Costco, so you can check it out. I do have how to make your own homemade mayonnaise. If you have my book, Handmade, there is a tutorial and recipe in there for how to make your own homemade mayonnaise, which I do sometimes, but I kind of, it depends on what season I am in life and how busy we are. And so if you're not at the point where you want to make your homemade mayonnaise, and it doesn't take very long, but honestly, sometimes I'm just like, I don't have time to make mayonnaise right now. This is what I buy. So avocado oil mayonnaise, I like it better than the olive oil mayonnaise because I feel like the avocado oil doesn't have as strong of a taste coming through. and it's still nice and creamy. So get yourself some of this. Now I know I've talked a lot about like I'm growing it myself, I'm making it myself, I'm canning it, I'm grinding my own flour. So for those of you who are like, okay, that sounds awesome, but I'm not sure I'm ready to make all those steps, trust me, you will be soon. I'll meet you there when you're ready. But this is gonna make some of you probably very happy. Yes, this is boxed mac and cheese. And yes, I can make mac and cheese from scratch, which is actually my favorite way, especially if you use like some smoked Gouda, because, sorry guys, smoked Gouda makes everything better. And then a really sharp cheddar. I really like cheese, and I'm actually making myself quite hungry right now, but I do still buy some convenience foods for my kids that they can make without me, or if I don't feel like making it all from scratch. And again, the organic. I choose the organic mac and cheese. It's the Annie's brand. I can get it in bulk from Costco, and I'm happy with the ingredients in there. So there you go. And the other great thing is not only am I happy with the ingredients, my kids actually like the way that this one tastes. They're not always crazy. We don't buy cold cereal hardly ever, like a couple times a year. But my kids do not like the healthy version of cold cereal that they get on occasion. But they are very happy about this swap out. So there you go. That is my top 13 healthier ingredient options that I started with when we started making over our kitchen and our eating habits.